Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know, I'm Deborah and you're watching Ask Deborah. So today I wanted to talk to you about education healthcare plans, otherwise known as EHCPs. What are they and how can you get one? But did you know that around 14% of the school population have special educational needs, and yet just under 3% of students have an EHCP? Now, they can be both long and confusing, so I thought I'd give you a quick video explaining what they are and how you can get one. EHCP is a legally binding document in which the local authority have to follow if issued to your child. An EHCP will be necessary where a child or young person requires more support than a school can provide under their own resources. It will include information about your child, their special educational need, and the outcomes that are expected from the provision provided. It may also include information about their health or social care needs. Once an EHCP is issued, your child may be able to access things like one-to-one support, therapy, or a specialist setting, as you'll need an EHCP to go to a specialist school. The laws governing an EHCP are the Children and Families Act 2014, the SEND Regulations 2014, and the SEND Code of Practice. Now, any child with a special educational need that cannot be supported through the school's own resource should be entitled to an EHCP. But what constitutes to a special educational need? Well, Section 20, subsection 1 of the Children and Families Act 2014 has a two-part definition. It states that a child or young person has a special educational need if he or she has a learning difficulty or disability which calls for special educational provision to be provided for him or her. It goes on to say that a child of compulsory school age has a learning difficulty or disability if he or she has a significantly greater difficulty in learning than the majority of others of the same age, or others of the same age in a mainstream school or mainstream post-16 institution. So what that essentially means is that if a child or young person has a learning difficulty that requires special educational provision, or they have a disability that requires the same, then they have special educational needs. Additionally, if that learning difficulty or disability means that they find things much more difficult than their peers of the same age, then they have special educational needs. So what do you do if your child has a learning difficulty or a disability and they are struggling within school? How do you go about obtaining one of these EHCPs? Well, the first step is to request for an assessment. Now, any parent, young person, or person acting on behalf of a school or a post-16 institution can request for an EHCP assessment from the local authority. And there is no requirement of an educational psychologist report for an assessment. There is only a requirement to show that the child has or may have a special educational need and that an EHCP may be needed to provide support. On request, the local authority will have 6 weeks to decide whether or not they are going to issue an assessment. Now, should the local authority refuse to issue an assessment, then you will have the right to appeal. And you must do this within 2 months of the decision being issued or a month from the mediation certificate being received. Now, for most appeals, there is a requirement to at least consider mediation. However, if you refuse, then a mediation certificate will be issued. Now, there are no fees for an appeal. However, you may incur costs if you decide to use a lawyer or an advocate. The SEND tribunal will apply the law and not the local authority's policies. And so it's worth noting that just registering the appeal alone may be enough, as the majority of appeals do settle. Now, the process will usually take 12 weeks, but it's always worth planning in advance as there may sometimes be delays. Should the local authority decide to issue an assessment, then they must seek advice from the relevant people, such as the parents, schools, medical professionals, educational psychologists, and other experts as and when required. And these professionals must provide their information within 6 weeks of the local authority's request. Following the outcome of the assessment, the local authority will either decide to issue the EHCP or refuse. Now, where the local authority refuses to issue a plan, you can, of course, appeal. Should the local authority decide to issue an EHCP, they must first issue a draft version. Now, this will have to be specific to the child's needs and must detail the provisions that will be available to meet those needs. It must state what they are, when they will be provided, and how long they will be provided for. Section A will cover the views, interests, and aspirations of the child and those of their parents, while Section B will highlight their needs. Now, these needs must be individually detailed and must address their communication and interaction, their cognition and learning, sensory and physical, social, emotional, and mental health needs. Section C will highlight any healthcare needs that relate to their special educational needs. It will not include things like allergies unless it relates to their SEN. Section D will highlight any social care needs insofar as it relates to the child's special educational needs. Section E will outline the outcomes, i.e. the intended results of the provision that are required to meet their needs. It should include a range of outcomes over a period of time. Now, Section F will highlight the provision required, and it's really important to ensure that each provision is specified for each need. So, for example, if your child has a language impairment and will require speech and language therapy, this will be identified in Section F and should state how long and how often this will be provided. Section G will highlight any healthcare provisions only where the clinical commissioning group have agreed. The local authority have no right to include anything in this section. Section H will include any social care provision, and Section I will specify the name and type of institution that your child is going to. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that children with an EHCP have a higher priority when it comes to choosing their school, and your child's chosen school will be named in Section I. Section J will include a personal budget if there is one, and Section K will provide a list of all the information that was gathered to make the assessment. An EHCP essentially gives greater rights as to what type of school your child can attend. Now, once the draft has been received, you'll have 15 days to make your comments and send these back to the local authority to either make amendments or accept the draft. If there are no requested amendments, the local authority will then issue a finalised plan. Once finalised, this will come into immediate effect and the provisions must be followed. Now, it's worth noting that if you are unhappy with the finalised EHCP, you can make an appeal to the SEND tribunal, and they will have the power to order the local authority to make changes to sections B, F, or I. They can also make non-binding recommendations for health and social care. Okay guys, so I know that was a little bit of a mind boggle. EHCPs are so important where your child has a learning difficulty or a disability that is acting as a barrier to their learning. As a parent of a child who holds an EHCP myself, I completely understand how frustrating it may be where you are trying to access support and it seems you just can't get it. Hopefully with this video, you'll now understand that there is no requirement for an educational psychology report to request an EHCP assessment. You can approach your child's school for support with making an application, or you can do it yourself. I hope this video has been somewhat helpful for you. If you like what you see and you want to see more, or you have a suggestion, please leave a comment. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and of course, hit the bell button for more alerts. Until next time, guys, happy learning.